Hare Krishna. So just do it to Kirtan? Will you do it? No. Okay. I don't know. Okay, we'll just do 2 minute Kirtan and then we start the Bhagavad Gita class. Okay. We're in chapter 11. So we'll start chapter 11. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Introduction is at the start of a physical copy of the book, you have it at home. Om Meganatimandasya Yam Ganasana Katsurutam Yena Tasme Sri Guru Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manavishnu Shtadanam Yana Bhutale Swayarupadagam Rati Swapanikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sita Padakamalam Sri Guru Hespuram Scha Sri Rupam Sagajatam Sadhana Radhata Vikam Jamsajivam Sadvatam Sadhanutam Patsujaya Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Sankamascha. Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dino Bando Jagatpate Gopesa Gauri Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kancha Gaurani Radha Vrindavasati Visubhani Sutadevi Pranamani Haripriye Panchakapastrubhischa Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanayam Pavanavyo Vaishnaveyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to chapter 11. chapter 1 all the way to chapter 11 now. Some chapters require 2 or 3 sessions because they're a little bit complicated. At the end, we can do a revision of the previous chapters, so everyone is on the same page. Chapter 11 is the chapter that a lot of people focus on, sometimes for the wrong reasons. Chapter 11 is universal form. Anybody that's seen a cartoon or a video of Mahabharata will know what sort of thing we're talking about when we see universal form. And really, the universal form, which is shown to Arjuna with special eyes, is an indication that really everything is under Krishna's control. That's the idea. If you remember from chapter 3 and chapter 4, that Krishna has designed the material universe to slowly get the living conditioned soul and material body to accept the idea that all action is for sacrifice, that all karma is for yajna. And through the process of karma for yajna, we will understand slowly that this material world is not a place where we can find happiness. Yeah? Through austerities, through different religions and different births, we can finally approach God as a person. If we're not ready to approach God as a person, when we see God as a person, we will dismiss him, or be envious, or ignore him, and then carry on being born again and again into the world. So universal form, chapter 11, is about some core themes that devotees need to learn from Arjuna's own behavior. So it's really an example of when you are dealing with suddenly the Lord moving from your friend and charioteer to the total sum existence of everything, there is a strange effect that goes on within Arjuna's mind and his heart. Yeah? So the core themes in chapter 11 are time, which is a very big part of understanding both chapter 11 and the Bhagavad Gita. The humility required for true spiritual vision, humility required to really see Krishna. And I think last week, the week before, I explained that Krishna is really seen through the ears. Yeah? We hear the Shastra, and through that hearing process, we understand Krishna. Yeah? And the desire for God, yeah? We have a desire to help please God over demands towards God. So not God help me, do this for me, do that for me. What we're trying to learn is an attitude of that we are a part of Krishna and we exist for Krishna's pleasure. And gradually, as we go through the process of sadhana bhakti, which is regulatory bhakti, we will develop the idea that we want to serve God. And we want to serve God in a way that God wants to be served, not necessarily the way we want to be served. Yeah? So the common example is a very keen newlywed wife. You know, in the old days, who wants to please her husband, and trying to work out how does the husband like the shirts, how does the husband like this and how like that. Not, I will arrange everything my way and then the husband will accommodate that. No, the devotional mood is a mood very much about how you can do things that make Krishna have pleasure. Yeah? Krishna is the object of your pleasure. Yeah? And when we understand that, we move from devotional service, being an austerity, to being the source of our pleasure. Okay? So that's an important relationship to understand. Okay? Austerity is something which is painful and difficult. Like for some people, waking up at 3 a.m. and chanting Hare Krishna is very difficult. So it's an austerity. But the same program at 3 a.m. in the morning is very pleasurable for other people. So it's for pure bhakti, pure devotees. So it's not an austerity in that, it's moved beyond an austerity, not austerity anymore. If you enjoy it, it's not an austerity, right? So what we are doing in sadhana bhakti is moving from bhakti being like something difficult, which we don't enjoy, but we're coming away from our material activities, so it's an austerity, There's something that we are finding pleasure in. Okay? And the more we find pleasure in bhakti, depending on the intentions of our heart, the more and more we will find bhakti the source of our pleasure, and that is where we will get our pleasure from. Okay? So very often, a common example is that early morning artis or doing japa, as I just said, is very difficult if you're just starting off in Krishna consciousness. Because your pleasure comes from the material world and from your senses. But as you surrender to the process of sadhana bhakti, the source of your pleasure shifts. Yeah? And as the source of your pleasure shifts, you become dependent on another form of pleasure which is not material. And the surrendering process is the gradual increase of the getting pleasure from bhakti. It's not like some fall on the floor surrender. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah? In the bhakti process, we're talking about surrender as being a gradual shift from getting pleasure from your sense organs, and including the mind, which is known as the sixth sense in Bhagavad Gita, to getting senses, the soul's senses being finding pleasure in bhakti itself. Yeah? And that's a gradual process. Obviously, you can see that the more you're attached to material pleasure, the more that change will be in austerity. Yeah? The less you're attached, you'll be able to shift to the soul having pleasure rather than getting sense pleasures from the material body. So that depends on each individual and where they've come to in this life from all the bhakti they've done in previous lives and what their situation is, and ultimately what the intentions they have. When we looked at chapter 8, we looked at two types of deaths that Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. The one type of death where somebody tries to focus on God at the time of death, but they're attached to the material world. And then it's very difficult to find Krishna at the time of death, because death is very painful. Yeah? However, if you're attached to Krishna in the heart, it doesn't matter if your mind doesn't think of Krishna. You will go to the place of your most attachment at the time of death. Yeah? So the devotee gets hit by a bus. It doesn't matter so much. Krishna says all the yogic processes of leaving the body are not so important. Yeah? He will take over and assess the exam in where the heart is. Yeah? And where the heart is goes back to where we're getting our pleasure from. Yeah? The more we want pleasure from this world, the more we're likely to be reborn in this world, because that's where our attachment lies. So we're shifting the attachment of our pleasure through sadhana bhakti. Yeah? Okay. So then we look at the more deeper, the chapter goes more deeply into what is time. What is the real purpose of time? If you remember the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita, of the Lord, the living entity, time, and karma, yeah? And also we're looking at the energy, the true energy of the Lord. Yeah? These are the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita. And this chapter is very much about time. In the West, it's very famous, of course, the verse by Oppenheimer, time I am, death, destroyer of all worlds, and that sort of thing. Yeah? But when you understand the Bhagavad Gita, you have to go a little bit into what is meant by time. Yeah? So before I go into that, just some basic difference to understand. In the spiritual world, where we all came from, into the material world, there is no time. Okay? Time is a particular ingredient put by Krishna in the material world. Okay? So it has a very specific function. If you understand the function of time in this world and how it works, you're less going to be affected by the world around you. And that leads to a better practice of sadhana bhakti. Okay? And then it's easy to shift your attachment from material things to spiritual things. Okay. And then we look at the unbiased and unmotivated duty. Prabhupada's famous commentary in chapter 11, verse 55, which we'll do at the end if we have time. Otherwise, we can do that next week. Okay. So 1155 is there. Makkana Krima Paro, Matpakta Sanapajita, Nirvera Sarvabhutesu, Yasanam Eti Bandava. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and is friendly towards every living being, he certainly comes to me. Now, the reason why this verse is important in terms of structure is the first 6 chapters are about Karma Yoga, and the middle chapters are about Bhakti Yoga, middle 6 chapters, and the final 6 chapters are about Jnana Yoga, as we looked at. But this verse is the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. How you get from Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga, direction, which is a common path for the Grihastha ashram. So the example would be something very simple example. Let's say somebody lives for the next 30 years and they start with Krishna consciousness and they start in Karma Yoga. So what they do is they work and they give some money to Krishna. But they start with Karma Yoga, lust for oneself. So they give money to Krishna and they say, Krishna, give me a nice house. And Krishna says, if I give it, then you will come to Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is acting for me without any selfish desire. So then Krishna will allow them through the heart to approach Krishna without requesting very much. But the real attachment is to the work and family. Yeah? So you start by giving $10 a month to Krishna, and then you give $100 a month to Krishna, and then you give $500 a month to Krishna. And depending on your income, there'll be a pain point where that money, you can no longer enjoy that money for sense gratification. You start giving it more and more to Krishna, right? So the purpose of your action is becoming less and less about gratifying your senses and more about gratifying Krishna's senses. Right? If somebody earns $4,000 a month and they give $2,000 to Krishna, it's a lot more painful than if they give $50. Yeah? So then we are switching our Karma Yoga into Bhakti Yoga. And when somebody just goes to work, the main reason for that work is to serve Krishna in some way, then now they are now working in Bhakti Yoga. It's Bhakti Yoga, it's not Karma Yoga. Yeah? So the example that Prabhupada gives in the purple is no work should be done by any man except in relation to Krishna. This is called Krishna Karma. One may be engaged in various activities, but one should not be attached to the results of his work. The result should be done only for Krishna. For example, one may be engaged in business, but to transform that activity into Krishna consciousness, Bhakti Yoga, one has to do business for Krishna. If Krishna is the proprietor of the business, then Krishna should enjoy the profit of the business. Yeah? Early on in chapter 1 and chapter 2, we looked at the idea of who's the actual owner. We don't own these bodies. Krishna is the actual owner of the energy of our bodies. We're pretending to own the body, but we're not. It's an illusion. So if we really understand that we don't own the body, anything the body creates also belongs to Krishna. Yeah? And then our work moves from Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. Okay. So that's what that important verse is about. So, let's start off with our first theme, the vision of universal form. So the basic theme at the start, on the basic level, is time. So when Krishna sees the universal form, which is all the planetary systems, and all the demigods in Krishna, and all the warriors on the other side and his side, all the soldiers that are being eaten by Krishna's mouth, right? What he's seeing is the impact of change of the material body. Yeah? Even Brahma dies, even this planet will die, and even the sun will die. Yeah? So someone who's highly intelligent, not a Buddhi yoga, they know there's nothing permanent here, so they will not seek any pleasure in this world. Yeah? So that is what Krishna is actually trying to teach by showing this form, because everything is being engulfed by Krishna. Yeah? Even if the other side will win, that will be impermanent. Yeah? He will still destroy them as time. Yeah? All our bodies will be gone. All our anxieties that we have at the moment will disappear. They are very temporary. They're concoctions of the mind. Whether we like someone or hate someone or get annoyed at work by somebody or not, it's very, very temporary. Yeah? Even Brahma, whose 1 second is 500,000 years on Earth, even he's a very temporary flicker. There will be millions and millions and millions of Brahmas in the material universe. Yeah? So it's all very insignificant. Are very, very, very insignificant like that. Yeah? from reacting to whatever is going on in this world. Because it's all very temporal. So we'll go into time in a bit more. Yep. Time also has a purpose. Okay. So chapter 10 last week, we looked at Vibhuti Yoga. Everything that's beautiful in this world can only be beautiful or powerful or musical or smell wonderful if those smells, music, exist in Krishna. Yeah? For the atheists, they think that we created God out of some concept of looking around the world. But actually, according to Vibhuti Yoga in chapter 7 and chapter 10, nothing can exist here if it doesn't exist in Krishna. Because Krishna is the source of all creation. Right? He's the programmer of the coding. Right? All the coding comes from his brain, all the living entities you see. Yeah? And with sadhana bhakti, you eventually start seeing more and more of Krishna as well. Someone's very fast, very attractive, very musical. The first thing that will come to your mind is Krishna. Oh, that's been Krishna. And as that vision comes, one of the reasons you're in the material world, which is envy, starts dropping. Yeah, because instead of being envious in that situation, whether it's gross envy or soft envy, you just start seeing the Lord more and more. Yeah? That's the vision we're trying to develop. Okay? So Arjuna's never demanding of Krishna. He's sort of like, if you think it's appropriate. Yeah? Because at this stage, remember the Bhagavad Gita can finish at chapter 10, verse 42. You can go from 2.7 to 10.42. But now is the supporting little bit at the end. These are the question and answer sessions that happen at the end. Right? The last 6 chapters. Yeah? A really good way of explained, Bhagavad Gita is explained, is like a podcast. It's a podcast, and really one person is doing a lot of talking. At this point, Krishna has done a lot of talking. But as you see the last 6, 7 chapters, Arjuna is going to ask a lot of questions. More and more to kind of go, I kind of understood that, but I didn't quite understand it. Can you explain it from a different perspective? So there's a lot of that going on. So that's going to happen in a bit after chapter 11. So he starts saying, well, Harry, if you think it's possible, explain this. So Krishna says, of course, because that's why they're there. They're there to explain this for the benefit of the whole world and also for the benefit of the demigods, the whole universe. Krishna says in chapter 4, the start, the Bhagavad Gita was really spoken for the demigods, but ruling over karma, and ruling over the universe. That's the real idea behind the concept of action as sacrifice, karma as yajna, that purifies you. Yeah? The more action you do for yajna, the more of austerity your life becomes, the more you purify it, the easier it is to attach yourself to God. Very basic formula underlying the first part of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So, attitude is important. We've seen that in chapter 8. Yeah? So true devotion involves desiring to see God, not demanding to see God. Yeah? As we progress in our bhakti, every time we come to the temple, we understand the mercy of Krishna. Because we understand, especially from chapter 18, we will do later, that there's no action of ours which isn't actually sanctioned by the Lord. He's in our heart as a super soul. We might have a desire to come to the temple, but Krishna thinks, okay, maybe we're going to come here and create an offense, or we're not going to be very positive, or he doesn't like our mood. Then what will happen, his own way will be attracted to the television, or something will happen in the house, and he'll arrange that we don't come. But through his mercy, we can come as well. He might arrange for us to come. Our minds might be clear, the stress of the last few hours of work will be less, and suddenly we can come to the temple. That's Krishna's arrangement. We know from our Brahma Samhita that Krishna is the cause of all causes. Yeah? So Arjuna's eyes, which of course are temporary, cannot see this form of Krishna. Okay? Krishna can only give him that vision of seeing it. Yeah? And we know this from chapter 15, verse 15, that really Krishna is the real decider when you're ready to see him at what level. Yeah? The more your sadhana bhakti shows attachment to Krishna and less attachment to material comforts, including less pain, less suffering, whatever it is, the more you're dependent on Krishna, the more Krishna reveals himself. Yeah? Because you don't create offense when he reveals a bit more of himself. Yeah? Until finally, he'll reveal everything about himself to you. Yeah? But Krishna's showing one side here, which is how the material world So there's two aspects of the vision, the universal fluid vision. We call it the awesome aspect, all the demigods, all the glorious Agni and Indra, and so on, the god of fire, and the god of wind, and the god of waters. And he sees all those very attractively dressed demigods administering all the energies of the universe, and he sees the source of all their powers as Krishna. Almost sees how they become those demigods through many, many births of piety. They get to be those demigods because they're attached to a high number of material opulence. They're attached to that material opulence, but also they have the ability to do the punya, to do the yajna to get that. That results in demigod birth. And then he sees the other side, because remember, as we're, the material world is here to reform your behavior. It is an act of mercy, the Supreme Lord. So he sees all the aspects of death. Now, death causes death in the material body, and depending on where you are, that is a concern in your bhakti. Some people have no concern about death, they don't see themselves as this body, they just see one transformation to another transformation to another. But some people attach to the body, that is a reminder that you cannot enjoy this world. You only enjoy this world for a fraction of a portion of time. It is not permanent. Now, when you really get to sadhana bhakti, you realize that one of the greatest mercies you have is death. Krishna's invention of material death. Because if we live forever and we're all 25, probably none of us will bother coming to Krishna, right? We'll be like, oh, we can do it in a million years' time, it doesn't matter, we can do some rounds in 50 million years. But because death is there, because we have to face that final test, we have to think about what it is we have to really do here. So death is Krishna's greatest mercy, and eventually you can almost celebrate that fact, because without that you don't get Krishna, and therefore anything that gets you to Krishna really should be celebrated, especially closer to Krishna. So time. So here we now have the deeper level of the understanding of time. Why did Krishna create time? What is time? What is time? Arjuna asks, who are you? Krishna says, I am time, destroyer of all worlds. Now in the context of the battle, he says, they're all going to die anyway. Just be my instrument. I want you to kill them early and be my friend. Get rid of the problem for me. And there's a reason why that is done. We looked at chapter 1 and chapter 2. But the important thing for us in terms of what is time is really the inability of any material pleasure to be permanent. That's the purpose of why time was invented. Of the 5 constituent topics of Bhagavad Gita, why time is in the material world is to make us learn that there is no enjoyment unless we go back to enjoying for Krishna's benefit. That's where we'll get our real pleasure. So time is there to correct our behavior. No matter how young we might be now, we are going to be very, very old and very ill in a fraction of a second and undergo a very cruel physical death because we were born here. And that change of the body is the mercy that pushes you closer and closer to the Lord. That's the real purpose of time. It's one of the great gifts. No material pleasure can ever be permanent because the body that Krishna has designed for your soul to sit in cannot eat 50,000 chocolates a day. And the tongue cannot enjoy like that. You cannot hold on to your child for hours and hours and hours enjoying that pleasure. You're not even neurologically designed, the brain isn't even designed to do that. So time, every pleasure changes. Until with Buddhi Yoga and intelligence, linked to the divine, you understand there's no point pursuing material pleasure. In Bhagavatam, it says that is where your devotional service begins. Canto 3, chapter 25, verse 25. When you get to this total understanding that I'm not going to bother eating a chocolate because I don't want temporary pleasure. You just don't bother. Let me go to chanting Hare Krishna. That's pleasure. Then Bhakti Yoga starts becoming easy. Because real renouncement, the idea of renouncement of Tyaga, is really the shift of the source of pleasure. That's what renouncement really means in the Bhagavad Gita context. Where do I get my pleasure from? And time is there to switch where you get your pleasure from. You get your pleasure from serving Krishna. Initially, no, you're not going to get pleasure because your design habit is to get pleasure from Allah. Even if you're serving in the temple, you're not immediately going to happen straight away like that. It takes time. Because you've got the analysis for millions and millions of births. You enjoy the magnet has been pulled to the world. So it takes time. But you must be patient with yourself, you must be caring with yourself, and you must be forgiving of yourself and others. Because it's a difficult process. For the attached, it's always difficult. For unattached, it's easy. Attached is very difficult. We can have questions on that because sometimes people want to ask about how to do that in many different ways. Okay. So time is one of the great gifts. But the idea of time is to eventually learn not to seek pleasure from the material senses, including the mind. So, finally, we dip back into Karma Yoga. We dip back into Karma Yoga a little bit, So Krishna talks about the idea of non-personal action, the Yagna concept. And he's telling Arjuna how he wants him to fight. So there's two things. Fight for me, not for yourself. Not because you think it's a good idea, not because you feel it feels nice, okay, the bad guys is great. No, just fight for me, and this is how I want you to fight for me. Because I have descended, chapter 4, verse 7, to set an example for everyone else. As my devotee, you have to set an example as well. That's explained in chapter 4. So this is how he wants him to perform. We all have our nature from our previous births. The idea is that nature is still here as a material attachment, and you then put it into the fire of sacrifice for Krishna, and it burns up all the previous births. As you move your action into Bhakti Yoga, if I'm a violin player, and that's my nature, I do violin playing for Krishna. And only for Krishna. I gave the example of soap, a bar of soap, to remember this. S stands for stimulus. The stimulus of your work is Krishna. I go to work for Krishna. The object of the work is, when I get something from work, I go, do you do this for Krishna? And the process, when you're at work, you're trying to think of Krishna as much as possible. You remember why you're there. People who are very motivated with an object in work, like, I go to work because I want my kids to have ballerina classes or dance lessons. That's why I'm going to work. They think about that during the day quite a lot. They think, oh, a bit of 45 minutes. Oh, I don't enjoy this, but my kids, child dancing, really important. So the object of the work is there all the time. And what Krishna is saying is substitute that material enjoyment for me. So every 45 minutes, they're thinking, the kids' classes think, I want to serve Krishna, that's why I'm at work. There's no other reason for me. So if somebody stresses me out, it doesn't matter. I have a purpose at work. So that is Bhakti Yoga, even though we're working. And then anything that is related to that becomes Bhakti as well. Paying for petrol to go to work, that's the only way you can get there. And all your products of the work and the purpose of the work is Krishna, then even filling up your car will become part of the Bhakti process. And you might incorporate it into that Bhakti process. Right. So the conclusions of chapter 11. Okay. Everything exists within God. Even destruction and death, as Arjuna sees in the universal form, under divine law, under Krishna's control. Right? He sees Krishna as controlling all the universes through his administrators, which are demigods. That's what he sees in the material, in the universal form. And he sees that every sanction of every act is Krishna. How How is Krishna aware of everything that's ever going to happen in past, present, and future? Because as a super soul, he sees everyone's desires. And he knows that depending on how attached they are to their desires, they will act. And they will get their next body. Yeah? If you act in this world and do not have sacrifice, then you go to lowish planetary systems. If you act in this world for sacrifice, you go to higher planetary systems. And if you give up the fruits of your labours towards Krishna, you begin the process onto going into Bhakti Yoga. Okay? And it's different for every single person. Okay? So at the end, you see, at the end of the universal form, he shows Arjuna a far superior form of himself, which is a two-arm bending form. You know, he's bending two arms with like fruit. That's what a beautiful form is seen. And he says, no one really gets to see me like this. Even though I've got two arms, I'm wandering around the battlefield with all my jewelry on, you don't see me like this. This is my real form. You know? I'm going to show it to you because you're a pure devotee. Yeah? And we know Arjuna's a pure devotee because at the end of Bhagavad Gita, he only acts. The only reason he's falling in a fight is for Krishna. There's no other reason. 100% for Krishna. Right. Okay, so that's that. So now let's build something up on where we're going with this idea of surrender. And how do we achieve surrender? What does surrender mean? Because this is a kind of confusing topic. You know? The kind of populist religious idea of surrender is somebody who drops himself on the floor in a religious building. You know, violence, surrender. Or I give something up, you know, renounce something. But surrender in the Bhakti Yoga process is not about that. You know, that's a small part of it, but that's not the focus of the meaning of surrender. Okay? The meaning of surrender is to understand that my nature as a soul, and I as a soul, are naturally pleasure-seeking. The reason I'm pleasure-seeking is because I'm a small part, the small nature of Krishna. Krishna is pleasure-seeking all the time, having all the pleasure of the pastimes, which we learn about. And I am a little fragmentary part. I'm like the salty water in the spoon of the ocean. I'm similar in saltiness to the ocean. So my nature is also to enjoy. Right? So Krishna explains over the first 11 chapters, 12 chapters, the problem you have, Arjuna, is you can't stop acting. Because the nature of the soul is to always act. For most living entities, they can't sit still. Okay? So the idea of surrender is to shift action. Yeah? And the idea of shifting action is to start to discover what Krishna wants. Originally, at the start, our religious or spiritual process is about what we want. We're in pain, we're suffering, we don't like the world, we find something attractive about Krishna. We're trying to kind of, we kind of lower ourselves before Krishna or devotees or whatever it is. But where we are trying to get to is to please Krishna. And in order to please somebody, you need to understand what pleases them. If you don't have that in mind, you can't completely surrender. Because complete surrender means pleasing Krishna all the time. Okay? So the purpose of the Shastras really is to get you from the shift of I'm in the spiritual journey for myself to really I'm in the spiritual journey for Krishna. And then it becomes a lot more exciting. Because you can actually do a lot in this world even though you're stuck in a temporary body. Every day will become very, very exciting. Because you're back to your original position as a servant of God. Servant of God means what does my master want and how do I make him happy? The focus of every day and then every hour and every minute becomes how do we make Krishna happy. Our entire behavior changes. Krishna gives us the knowledge to do that. One of the things we have to understand is that everything is part of Krishna. There's no separation. Universal form, nothing was separate. Everything had the super soul in it, every act. There was no separation of interest Arjuna's interest was Krishna's interest. It wasn't separation of interest by the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah? So what we should be looking for in the Shastra, in the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita is what pleases Krishna. What is Krishna saying that will indicate to me every day I can act to please him? Yeah? And the devotional service process does please the Lord. But then you can go beyond that. That will be a very important part of it. It's like the wife who marries the husband and goes, okay, my husband likes to have iron trousers and all this stuff. Yeah? But then you want to move beyond that into a personal relationship. Yeah? So beyond the trouser ironing and the food cooking and all of that, what does Krishna really like? What really does give him pleasure? Okay? And the thing we learn from the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, remember the end of the Bhagavad Gita, is Krishna really enjoys more than anything else if you explain to people who are not against Krishna, if you explain to them about Krishna for the first time. If you preach to them about Krishna. Because Krishna created this world so every soul could find his way back, or her way back, to serving the Lord with the Lord's own interest in mind, as a pure devotee. That's the entire purpose of everything. There isn't a lot of purpose. Everything you see, only serves has that one purpose. There may be a lot of distractions that happen in your lives because you put them there, but that is the one purpose. Yeah? Many, many times you'll be trying to do bhakti, and it'll be you, and it'll be Krishna, you'll be trying to talk to Krishna, and somebody else will keep coming in, or something will come in between the two of you. Yeah? And over time you work out how to do it without that interference. Then you're going to move on to thinking, Krishna, how do I please you? The only purpose of my existence is to please you how you want to be pleased. Tell me more about yourself. Where do I find that information? Okay? We know from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, if you help his mission here of creating this world, you please Krishna above all things. Yeah? No one is more dear to me, Krishna says. No one is more dear to me. And he explains the art of bhakti to a soul who may never get it. Okay? So you imagine for Prabhupada understanding that in 1965-66, going to the US in many ways was deeply pleasurable because he knew Krishna would be happy. That was what Krishna wanted. As a pure devotee, he saw that. So who we give Krishna consciousness to, who are exposed to Krishna consciousness, who even sees a Bhagavad Gita for 1 second, that soul registers that Bhagavad Gita, will eternally change the karmic journey of that soul, birth after birth after birth. Yeah? Because this material nature, Krishna says, Devi Yasi Gurumaya, Bhagavad Gita 7:14, is under Krishna's control. Yeah? Once you do what Krishna wants you to do, life is a walk in the park, because you're actually doing what the system is designed for. Yeah? If you play a computer game where you have to shoot lots of bad guys, but you start walking backwards through the computer game and get shot all the time, it's a bit nonsensical, it's a bit of a waste of time. Right? But if you read the instructions, it says the point of the game is to shoot everyone, then you do that and the game becomes more interesting, you start moving to the different levels and what have you. Yeah? To give a really bad example. So you have to think about, what is the purpose of all this? Well, why not this body? Why is this body going to die? What's the one purpose of all of it? To discover what Krishna wants and serve him as he wants. Not as I want, but as he wants. That's real service. If you like to eat baked beans on toast, but I make you cucumbers on, I don't know, on blue cheese, it's not really going to be, no, it's nice, you make me something. It's nice. It's not really what I want to eat, it's not the same thing. If you ask me what I want to eat and then make it, it's different. It's a different relationship. Right? So the point of going to Bhagavatam class all the time, every morning, is to start to understand what is it that Krishna really wants. How do I fit into that equation? Because I have an eternal relationship of assisting in this function of pleasing Krishna. I somehow lost my way a little bit. Yes, it's nice we come to the temple, it's nice we do kirtan, all these things are very, very important, so that we get to the point of going, now, what does Krishna want? It's not about me anymore. I get it, you know. I'm a bad, naughty soul. A million times I went to hell. Thousands of births, thousands of Brahma. I still went to hell. I'm still here. You know, I'm pretty naughty. You know. But now it's about you. Finally, it's about you. It's not about me anymore. Well, we're going to go to hell along. Let's make it about you. Let's learn the lesson. The real lesson we're here for. Everything else in life is actually irrelevant. So then we have the final aspect of surrender, which is dependency. And that's the hardest thing to get. Krishna says in chapter 7, verse 27, we came here because we wanted to play God. We wanted to be Krishna, not serve him, we wanted to be God. Therefore, we think we can control. Now, the purer a devotee, the less anxious they are. Why? Because their understanding of what they can control becomes very, very small. A materialist is trying to control everything, their bank balance, their pension, you know, what their medical insurance is, what their body, what their diet is, what their fitness is, you know, what they can control. The whole economic, modern world, industrial Western world is built on the idea of I can control. But as we switch to I can control very little and very impermanent responsibility, I need to have dependency. So you go from ice to dice. Ice means I'm independent, I'm the controller, you know, and I'm the enjoyer. And dice is basically the opposite, right? So, you know, I'm not independent. I'm to be enjoyed. I'm not the controller. You know, I'm not the doer. You know? If we understand that, bhakti becomes quite easy. Because our tendency to start thinking about things we can never control reduces. Then we open up new possibilities of what we can do with ourselves. Reduce your dependency, your independency on your ability to change things around you and start increasing your dependency upon Krishna. The more you want to serve Krishna in the way Krishna wants to be served, the easier it will be to be dependent on Krishna. And the faster he will facilitate that. Just push the ego down. It's not about me, my bhakti isn't about me, it's about Krishna. I'm coming to the temple for Krishna, I'm not coming for myself, not because I want something, or I want to get a new job. No, I'm just here to Krishna sees me. Okay? Krishna sees me. I haven't forgotten you. I'm here for you. What do you want me to do? Okay? Is there someone out there desperately looking for you? I need to give them a Bhagavad Gita to on the bottom of Fullerton Road. Those are the questions. Life is very easy, it's not about you. The mania of the self comes to an end. The tyranny of the mind will also come to an end. That's the great thing about the bhakti process. It puts an end to the tyranny of the mind, which is me, I just pay my kids, I drive a car, I got this to be done, No, you're part of something else. You're supposed to be doing something else for that big part. It's not about you. So, and we have to repeat. We have to repeat because we learn in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna has deliberately put his potency of forgetfulness in this world. So we have to overcome it to get pure. Yeah? So as you walk out of here, we see the cricket score, we forget. What was the temple? What was Krishna? What's going on? What's going on? Cricket match. Immediately, sense gratification. Yeah? If we're thinking, how do I always please Krishna? And how does Krishna want to be pleased? Very easy. Very easy. So, any questions on that? Thank you for listening. Great audience. Mataji, yeah.
2 questions.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that Bhagavad Gita was spoken for demigods, or that it was for jivas?
Yeah, so the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, everyone yeah? Krishna explains chapter 3 and chapter 4 about the system of yoga, starting point of why how the design of the universe, the material universe, to purify the soul, so one day that soul might do bhakti in a different life. Yeah? So the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to the demigods because they were able to act less selfishly than the conditioned souls of the lower planetary systems. So Krishna says, I spoke it to the sun god, the first verse of chapter 3, first second verse. But it was forgotten, so every time I forget, I come back. Right? And the reason you forget is because I put forgetfulness in this world. The soul by its nature doesn't forget, it's covered by material energy. Yeah? And the forgetfulness is there to be overcome to create sincerity in bhakti. That's why we forget. So in Buddha Yoga, we keep coming back to the Shastra, we keep reading Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavata and Chaitanya Charitamrita because we know we're covered by the potency of forgetfulness. Yeah? So our sincerity is by consistency. Through consistency we get sincerity and then we can surrender. Surrender the source of our pleasure from the material world to the spiritual. Yeah? So that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, Bhagavad Gita was administered, was administration. You've got to remember that Vedically the system of time is not chronological in the sense that it's cyclical. So there's Satya Yuga, then we have Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, and they come again and again. And demigods have to see many of those cycles, and many days and moments. So in Satya Yuga, they're administrating the world a different way than they are in Kali Yuga. Well, they're not really going to be present here because there's no yajna for sacrifice in Kali Yuga. The purity levels are very poor. The quality of the souls that are coming from the karmic history and the moment in Kali Yuga, even the idea of God is a very difficult concept for them. Yeah? So the demigod control is kind of coming off, sending adverse karma that's coming on these people, putting it very basically. Yeah? And then of course Satya Yuga comes around, and it's a different arrangement. Yeah? The system of the yajna is very much there. The souls on their last legs out of the material world. So we have to understand who we are if we're even more in Kali Yuga. That's a more advanced topic, it's a Bhagavatam topic, really. The basic thing we take away is if we have this body which is Krishna's energy, then it's not our energy, we use it for Krishna. If we can do that as a starting point, then we can do a lot of progress from that, accepting that concept.
My second question.
Yeah.
So, 5 aspects of Bhagavad Gita is only for material world or for spiritual world as well? Like 5 aspects like Ishvara, Jiva.
No, Bhagavad Gita is really in the spiritual world you don't need any Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. So it's to understand what this is. Why are we here? That's what the 5 topics are there. If you understand those 5 topics, you understand the real purpose of being a material body. If you understand the real purpose of being a material body, if you accept that knowledge into your heart, you will act according to that knowledge. Yeah? And you'll be able to overcome your tendencies to enjoy the material world. Yeah? And identify yourself with this body in the mind, which you're not. This is a hallucination. Yeah? If my name is Deborah, and I worked in Westpac, that's a hallucination. Yeah? I just one birth out of trees. It's irrelevant. Yeah, in terms of time is always going to be here. Yeah, I'm always going to get old and be reborn if I want to enjoy this world. So I've been maybe Deborah millions of times. I don't even know. It's eternal. Eternal prison. Yeah. But we want to end that because we're smarter than that. That's why we're here. We want to get out of it. Yeah. If we don't want to get out of it, at least we want to achieve pure devotional service. Side question, yeah.
There was a verse where you mentioned that you have to treat your enemies as friends as well. Suppose we have an issue at workplace, I'm asking only one.
That is the most popular question of the last 5 years. It comes up every time. It's amazing how much time.
If your boss, your colleagues are not treating you well, so what should you do in that scenario?
Okay, so this all depends on how much you accept the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah? So a lot of people, they're just learning these teachings. They haven't digested them in their heart. And the answer is always the same, which is that you don't get too engaged and too worked up. But if you identify this body and you identify them as their body, you're going to get worked up. That's your reality. Yeah? So what you have to do in the short term is not get too involved. Yeah?
So have to just get away from that? Like,
Well, not leave your job because you might need to go to work, but you have to basically come away from thinking about it after work as much as possible. That's difficult. If you're new to Bhakti Yoga, your mind is not under your control. So something does something to you, you're going to react all the time and think about it all the time. Yeah? But if you get good at Bhakti Yoga, if you get good at, for example, like chanting Hare Krishna, do it for 20 years, it doesn't matter if someone says something to you, you won't even remember it a second later. Right? Because you've adapted, you've adapted to not going in with the mind. The mind is just like this, one of Krishna's energies, chapter 7, verse 4. So you don't get attached to anything material which isn't in the mind. You just use the mind like your hand or finger as a tool to get to Krishna. Because what you're seeing actually here is a visual hallucination. These are not your eyes, these are just temporary things. The soul is different, it has its own organs, its own senses. It's just a hallucination. All these forms you're seeing of people. The more detached you are, no matter if they're swearing at you, you're just spiritually disabled. Spiritually, because they're conditioned as well. They're covered by material energy. So that's why we say forgiveness, because forgiveness shows knowledge that you're not the body and they're not the body. It's part of the process of detachment.
So in the spiritual world, is there any concept of time, or
no time.
how the concept of time started in the material world?
In terms of time, so the material world originally comes from the first expansion, which is Balayana, the first spiritual master. Yeah? And it existed, it's a strange thing to understand, because time, which is change, was only created in the material world when we entered these bodies to enjoy separately. So it's always been that. The material world has always been that. Time has always been that. Because time just means change, as I said. Change of the bodies. Yeah? The soul is not changing at all. It stays in its normal status. It's just changing its costume. Like an actor, one night the actor is playing one part, next night playing another part, then playing another part. So that change of bodies is basically what time is. Yeah? The material energy does not stay the same. It's the opposite of the spiritual world. It's a reflection of the spiritual world. It's a shadow. Right? You're grasping at the shadow.